I was born and raised in Los Angeles, the son of two immigrants to the United States. I'm the first person in the family to have undergone a legal education, so that was not a focus of my parents, but it ultimately ended up blending very well with the idea of public service that they instilled in me. It was only after I became disillusioned with the idea of diplomatic service that I decided to go to law school, and then that blended with the idea of public service. So it was natural for me at the conclusion of my law studies to apply to be a Deputy Attorney General in the California Department of Justice, and I was hired by then Attorney General Stanley Mosk, who later ended up many years later being a colleague of mine on the California Supreme Court. In terms of exposure to the law, I was very fortunate even before going on the bench, which was shortly after my 32nd birthday, by having extraordinary good fortune in the California Department of Justice. I managed to represent the state of California before the United States Supreme Court in arguments in 6 cases, and I came to be a justice of the Supreme Court, first as an associate justice, later as Chief Justice. There isn't any personal or ad hominem difference in terms of what one justice may feel on a given issue and that of another, and to recognize the good faith and intellectual validity of competing points of view and trying to resolve those. If I have 6 votes, including my own, and there's somebody out there who has a problem with one paragraph, if without weakening or reducing the quality of the court's opinion, I can satisfy the concern of that 7th person and bring him or her on board, I've achieved something by way of providing clear guidance to the readers of the opinion in the future. The Judicial Council of California is a body established in the California Constitution, and it is given the responsibility for the statewide administration of justice. Being Chief Justice of California involves not only writing one's 1/7 share of the opinions on the court, but also heading the branch, which is probably the largest law-trained judiciary in the world. We have 1,750 judges, judicial positions, which is double the number in the Article 3 federal judiciary. We have about 21,000 court employees, plus about 300 to 400 court commissioners, and a budget of almost $4 billion. And all of that entails traveling around the state and having countless meetings with legislators individually and with the governor to resolve matters of policy and budget. My workload basically tripled or quadrupled from when I was an associate justice of the California Supreme Court to when I became Chief Justice of the court and of the state. I became Chief Justice on May 1st of 1996, Law Day, symbolically. And 2 weeks later, I was before a joint session of the California legislature at their invitation, giving what became an annual State of the Judiciary address to a joint session. And in the first of those speeches, I made a commitment that I jokingly say some think I should have been committed for making, and that was that I would visit the courts in all of California's counties to get a better idea of what the current situation was, the problems, the solutions. So that was a 13,000-mile journey, and I completed it in a year. In the course of this journey, I realized that there were tremendous differences in procedures, in resources, in the quality of the physical buildings. So the 3 structural reforms that followed, and I'm very proud of that as certainly my main administrative legacy probably, was having the legislature agree to switch the funding source for our trial courts from the counties to the state of California. Secondly, to avoid duplication and make better use of the resources for the benefit of the taxpayers and citizens of the state, to merge the 220 municipal and superior courts in the state into one level of trial court, namely a superior court in each county. And then thirdly, and finally of these 3 structural reforms, transferring the 530 some court facilities in the state, from county maintenance and county ownership to the state of California under judicial branch management. I saw what a very poor relationship the California Supreme Court and the judiciary had generally with the legislature. So I made it my task, and it took several years to build up the kind of personal relationships with members of the legislature and with the various governors with whom I worked to try to sell them on the importance of adequate funding and adequate policy making vis-a-vis the judiciary. And I couldn't let how I would vote on my own cases as a Supreme Court justice be influenced by whether what I would do would please or displease the legislature or the governor, who often were parties to the lawsuits that I was deciding. My outreach to the whole state, going around to visiting the courts, involved also meeting with community groups in different areas. I continued that. Many other courts developed outreach programs, and I brought the California Supreme Court on the road, basically. So we held sessions in all sorts of small communities around the state, invited students in, let them ask questions of us, and so forth. We have programs, a very active judicial education program in California, that take into account the rich cultural diversity of our state, and that point out the need for sensitivity on behalf of judges to the different backgrounds and mores and ways of looking at things of our very diverse population. In any given year, more than 100 languages are translated in our California courts. So obviously, how can there be access in some of the more fundamental ways if you don't even have the ability to understand what's going on? So we've been vastly increasing the number of trained interpreters to perform that function. We're very proud of the fact that we have a nationally recognized and award-winning website that provides assistance to the self-represented litigants who are so frequently appearing now increasingly in our California courts. There were 3 decisions that the California Supreme Court rendered, and I authored the majority opinion in each of them, and together I think they form a very illuminating lesson in civics all through the question of marriage that showed that the court was doing its very best with sincerely held views on both sides of the issues to try to apply the law as the justices saw it to be. I think we have to do more training in the way of civics of our high school students, especially at that level, and middle school students, and do a better job than we have been in terms of civics, and not just focus on math and science, which are crucial, but also on civics.